Hi everyone, I have another new guest today with me, Kathryn. Hi Kathryn, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great, Kathryn. We're just chatting before this call, looking at each other's calendar, and I'm glad that I could find some time in her calendar. She's so busy. I think I'd wait for Kathryn 2 months to get a 30-minute slot in her calendar. 2 months.
Totally.
But finally, I'm glad and I'm elated to have her in the podcast. She's one of the very few individuals in the credit union ecosystem who needs no introduction, but as a customary, I do introductions for everyone. Let me do a quick introduction for Kathryn too. Kathryn is the CEO, president of Very First Credit Union. Uh, she's been in the credit union movement for good 30 years. That's 30 years, right? And that's insane. I mean, now she is one of the very rare CEOs I've met who's so mission driven. I mean, every single discussion we have is about why credit unions and how credit unions can help. She doesn't talk like a bank. She actually is a credit union veteran, right? And hence, she's in the ecosystem for 30 years. So that's pretty much about Kathryn. I can talk about 10 different things, but I want to keep the introduction short because I've got so many things to ask her, right? One quick achievement which I'm very proud about Catherine. I don't know if she's proud about or not. I'm very proud about her. Is that she got named as an honoree in the American Bankers top 15 most powerful women in credit unions. And Catherine, congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Cool. I hope I was able to do like 50% justice in your introduction because your journey of 30 years can't be summed up in 30 seconds. So I would rather leave the stage asking you questions and not doing a lot of introductions.
Thank you.
Cool. Let's go with the first customary questions that I ask everyone. It's different for Catherine because 30 years in credit unions, and she's a progressive CEO, is what I can say. She's a progressive CEO of a credit union with a specific mission. So, Catherine, you've got 24 hours in the day. You don't have more than that, right? So, what keeps you
Yep.
going in this hustle, bustle, and running a credit union?
I think it is that mission and purpose piece. It's literally the reason I wanted to run a credit union is the opportunity to do something different, to do something impactful. I think it's so important every single thing we do. Like we can't afford to be mediocre, be asleep at the wheel. So I am very purposeful with my 24 hours a day. I probably sleep 5 or 6 hours a day, and the remainder of the day, I want to make sure that we're making good happen. And so that is what fuels my soul. I've got fire in my belly to do this type of work. I think in particular for the community that I serve, that becomes even more mission centric because nobody else is doing it. And so I literally, wake up every morning and come running in here or run out to whatever we're doing for the day. And it feeds my soul. I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
I mean, unless it feeds your soul, you cannot do it. I think, Catherine, there's a sixth credit union you're working with, right? Or seventh?
This is my seventh credit union. This is lucky number seven for me. Yeah. Yeah. And so that, yeah,
Just
as you said, yeah, this year is my 30th year in credit unions, which is like shocking. I think I, like most folks, ended up here accidentally. And then you're just like, what is this? This is like magic. So yeah, I feel so fortunate also just to have spent my entire career in credit unions. It's awesome.
Absolutely. I came working with the capitalist world with the Fortune 500s, but after coming to the ecosystem of credit unions, I've never left. And I never thought of myself, I'll be a credit union guy, but now I'm a lifer for sure, right? So there is legit reason because of which you are there in the ecosystem. Absolutely. Uh, Moving on to your journey, Catherine, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
we were just talking earlier that 30 years back, there were not a lot of women out there in the financial services ecosystem, not only credit unions, also in banks, right? Now, uh, we want to know more about your journey. We know that you worked with six credit unions, is the seventh credit union, but we want to hear from you, right? What has been your journey so far?
Yeah. And I'm going to go back in the Wayback Machine to start it off because I think I might get into sort of what makes me tick. So I'm a first generation American here. So, like you, I've got this immigrant background, grew up in an immigrant household that I think really kind of fueled a lot of my experience and just sort of exposure to how stuff works, right? And then, so then I accidentally stumble into credit unions and I started off in marketing and I still love marketing today. I think it's one of the funnest jobs. But, as you kind of get, going in that journey and you're, growing and expanding, you start to realize, what, I think there's actually more I could be doing here. It was for me in 2007 that I was like, what, I want to become a CEO. And I, started to go out for that process. As you can imagine, not a lot of people were excited to hire a chief marketing officer to be their CEO, right? And while we have more today, that still doesn't correlate, quite frequently. And so I did have to make a bit of a sidestep, and I got an opportunity to run a very large social enterprise that was focused on financial counseling, housing counseling, debt management. And really kind of one of the things that led me to that journey. I was doing the math in my head before you and I were meeting today. I have been interested and focused on financial health for over 20 years now. And again, I think some of that stems back to that immigrant background and kind of watching what happened with my parents and how they interacted with money and what they did and didn't know, and sort of the stuff they didn't know, how that hurt them, right? And so that financial health experience kind of, parlayed into that CEO role. But I will say, those first couple years there, I had this epiphany and I was like, what, I have to go back to a credit union because the experience and the knowledge that I gained there, I'm like, I need financial products and I need a credit union to go do that at. And so Valley First came and knocked on my door, and I was really grateful for this opportunity. It literally is my dream job, and not because it's a CEO role, but it's in the community that we're in. We so need these types of services. Like it was just like a match made in heaven. And so I guess one thing I'd say about my journey, it definitely wasn't like this linear. It was a little bit kind of, all over the place. But it was also a reminder of you're always in the right place at the right time. It may not always feel like it, even right, like even the suckiest of experiences have a purpose. And I think one thing in running that social enterprise, I got an opportunity to interact with government. And that has been very
Yes.
instrumental in my role here, right? So I do a lot with my local government. They've been big supporters of the work we do, but it's also helped them amplify their work. And I don't think I probably would have figured that out had I not had that other experience. The other thing I'd say about my background, I'm definitely, as a marketer, I'm very creative and I'm a problem solver. And I will say, my last couple organizations, including this one, was not in awesome shape when I landed the role. And so there was a fair amount of, just cleanup and rebuilding that had to happen. And I think that problem solver background allowed me to do that.
Absolutely. I think, what you've done, Kathryn, over the previous few years, it's fantastic. There's a reason because of which American Banker puts you in that list every year, right? Let's
Thank
put it that way,
you.
right? And we are. I mean, I'm personally very, very, very proud, that I'm able to interview you in this podcast and to have you in the platform. This is living motivation for people who want to walk the path of Catherine, right? I mean, again, harping onto the fact she is a first generation American, right? Her parents were immigrant, and it's such a different story from an immigrant family to moving on to the ladder,
Yeah,
becoming CEO.
it
It's
is.
not
Yeah.
it's not easy. I mean, enormous respect. So great,
Thank you
great
so
about
much.
that. Absolutely. Piggybacking on the last question about your mission, right? Now, obviously, when
Yeah.
you landed this role, there was a lot of cleanup that's required, align the credit union to the mission, vision, looking at why are we doing this event, right? So, what
Yep.
is your vision for Valley First right now? What do you think? What is your roadmap or your vision? Why do you think Valley First is an amazing option for consumers slash members in the neighborhood?
Yeah. Yeah. So we serve the Central Valley part of California, which basically goes down as far south as Kern County, as far north up as Sacramento County. I'm in our headquarters, which is in Modesto, California. We are kind of the left behind part of our state. And I can say this because I'm from Los Angeles and I lived in San Francisco as well. Our coastal cities run very different. They have way more resources than we do. And one of the things that I'm seeing is when you look at what our national players, like the big banks, are doing, they're not underwriting locally because they don't understand some of the nuance of what's happening here. And I think that's a spot we really excel at. We give credit and deploy capital to our small businesses. We help get people into homes. We help get people into cars. We're doing work that nobody else is doing. And I remain really motivated and excited by that. I think it's really important, frankly, for any economy, but I think in particular for my economy here in the Central Valley. I have to tell you, when I look at some of the small business lending that we're doing, it just makes me want to cry. Like, I'm so proud of the people that we're reaching. We do a ton of minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, women-owned businesses. And so we're constantly putting back out into the community. So we're a CDFI credit union. We're also a low-income designated credit union. We're a Juntos Avanzamos credit union. And so it's really important that we're connecting with our members in our community and giving them access to credit and fair credit. Right? I mean, if you think about sort of some of the stuff they have access to, it's incredibly expensive. And so I'm really proud of the work that we're doing there. I personally have this very strong belief that you don't need to be a millionaire to live a rich life. But if we can help our members keep more money in their pocket, and that's exactly what we're focused on, they're going to have good lives. And generationally, we're helping them create wealth, right? We're getting them into homes. We're helping their businesses scale. They're employing other people. They're leaving legacy with those small businesses. So, we've been on this journey the last 5 years. I've been here. I really think COVID kind of amplified that for us. I have to tell you, we did not close one single branch because what do you think all the big banks were doing out here? Everything was shut down. And so it was very important that we were open, we were deploying capital, we were giving people access to their money. And so we're going to continue on that journey. I'm real, excited and hopeful for 2025. But it's all around that, our slogan, making good happen. We are very laser focused on, bringing in money into this community and deploying it out. I have to tell you, I get asked by my colleagues all the time, like other credit union CEOs, like, why don't you just buy loans from other areas? And while on the one hand, that would be easy to do, and that's kind of a plug and play, and it isn't a piece of a strategy, but I know for me, that money has to be deployed here, because if I don't do it, who will? You wouldn't believe the amount of loans that we do that other people rejected, and they're performing loans. They're beautiful loans. So the work we're doing is super important, and I'm jazzed about 25. We're gonna be doing a lot of cool stuff here.
Absolutely, Kathryn. I mean, no one more than an immigrant understands the meaning of credit, right? I mean, it took me.
Yes, and you and I had that conversation, right? Yes,
Exactly.
it's so important. I mean, I have to tell you, I grew up. My mom and dad, cash was king. They very sparingly put money into a bank. They never wanted to borrow money. And really, if you're doing that effectively, like you're winning, right? If you're able to leverage other people's money, that's really important. And I don't think that's not a common immigrant thing to do. It's also, when you think about the low income community that we serve, that their mind's not ticking that way either. So it's important that they understand the resource they have, and that we're a trusted partner, right? You can come to us and we'll help you. We're not just here to sell you something. I think that's another big piece of what we provide from an advice perspective.
Exactly. I mean, that's so important. The concept of financial education, the concept of financial counseling for small businesses, for normal consumers.
Yep.
What you're doing, I'm sitting out of East Coast, right? Completely different part of the country. But I
Yeah.
still hear, what Valley First is doing for its locality. I mean, there's a reason because of which your name is out there in New York itself. when people talk about your credit union and take your credit union as an example, that there's a leader who's doing something and she's making a difference, and that's great. Uh, on the next question, on your again, bit on your personal life. Uh, the last 30 years, I'm sure, has not been a bed of roses, right? Because you have to face multiple things, starting in a financial institution, a credit union, growing up to becoming a CEO, that to becoming a CEO, being a female leader. Uh, Not easy, right? So what are the challenges that
No.
what are the challenges that you faced? And how did you overcome the challenges? Do you want to share any nuggets?
Yeah, totally. No, definitely not an easy road. It's always shocking to me, just like the discrimination that comes from a gender biased
Yes.
view. I have three children, I'm a very active mom, and kind of going through that process, people sort of discount you, like when you're pregnant. I'm like, well, I'm still able to work. Like, why would you not invite me to that meeting? Why would you not consider me for XYZ? So I think kind of the amount of discounting that happens in the process is shocking in this day and age, and it still happens. I mean, I still face some of that in my role, which is always very surprising to me. I will say, nobody ever thinks I'm the CEO, so that's also kind of funny. Like, if my husband and I attend an event, they literally always think he's the CEO of Valley First. So it's weird, but you kind of also get used to it. I guess what I'd say is, I think the biggest thing is, you got to just keep putting yourself out there, and just keep showing up is one of the big things that I always tell people. And I think, don't let those moments get you down, right? When you are, not invited or included to things. I think if you just kind of consistently keep at it, you will find your place and make your way to the table. But I think it's about resilience and not giving up. I think the part of my journey I didn't share is the number of times I was rejected for a CEO role. And, it took me a good decade to get into the role. And I think probably what was so frustrating is I was in this kind of, top 2, 3, I was in the final round, and I just never got the offer. And there was a part of me that was like maybe this isn't meant to be for me. But like, in my heart, I knew I could do it, and I knew I could do it in a different way. I'll also say, I definitely was up for bigger roles that, where a credit union was over $1 billion, and they just never saw me as being able to run a credit union that big. And, so I just came and built it myself. My credit union was 590 million in assets when I got here 5 years ago. We're, close to 1.1 billion today. And that's all organic growth. And it's just focused on doing the things that are right. And so I think it's just important to don't lose faith in yourself. And I think to continue to show up. I will say, in particular, it is very challenging being a working parent. And that's for men and women. But obviously, I think, women probably take on a bigger burden of that. And, you've got to sort of don't discount yourself, right? There's moments in life where you're like, you know what, this year I'm focused on my family, and I'm out on maternity leave or whatever is happening there. There are so many amazing women that I have known that I wish they would have continued to follow that path. And they just kind of got exasperated with everything else around them and kind of bowed out. I think you've got to learn how to kind of ebb and flow with whatever's happening in your life. There's a season for everything. I can tell you personally, I coach female leaders all the time. I feel like oftentimes they're just hesitant to put themselves out there because it doesn't, right? It's not like this perfect path. And I would just really encourage, like, female leaders, it's not a perfect path. If you want to do something and you believe you can do it, just keep at it. And who cares if it takes you 10 years? Like, in the scheme of things, that's literally nothing. That's literally nothing. And I'd also say, as you think about work-life balance, that will never be perfect. But it is important to have priorities, right? And you've got to have priority. You can't just be like, oh, I'm just going to be like a workhorse and that's all I'm going to focus on. Like you've got to figure out that balance, but no, it won't be perfect. And so I think just to encourage people to don't give up. I think that's just one of the biggest things I see. People just are like, well, I wasn't included or I'm not viewed that way. If you keep showing up, you're going to find your path. Just don't give up.
Absolutely, Catherine. And this small section, you've spent 10 years behind your dream. You always dreamt of being a credit union CEO. This is not only, I would say, which aspiring female leaders should take inspiration from, but people, someone like me, never ever give up on your dream. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to have known you, someone who have waited for 10 years for a dream to come true, being rejected multiple times. This reminds me of a movie, per- Pursuit of Happiness, right? I mean, I don't know if you've watched Pursuit of Happiness. It's about uh, Chris Gardner wanted to become a stockbroker, right?
Okay.
So his wife was telling him, why not become a rocket scientist? If you want to become a stockbroker, you can also become a rocket scientist. And he remembered that till the end when he actually got the first job as a stockbroker. So this is like so relatable. Like this was just a flashback. What I felt was a visual of that movie, as if you're representing the movie now and not Chris Gardner, right? So I was just able to relate to
Oh, that's
that.
cool. Thank you.
This was
Thank you.
so amazing, right? I mean, obviously you share a lot of things, but explicitly I want to ask you a question about: do you have any advice for aspiring women leaders, right? And specifically people who want to become CEOs. It's not easy to have patience for 10 years, right? But still,
It's not.
what what is your piece of advice?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I think first and foremost, do something that you love, right?
Yep.
And so, right, what's that saying? Like if you're doing something you love, it's like you've never worked a day in your life, right? I mean, so just be passionate about what you're doing. I definitely would encourage female leaders, expand your network. Networking is huge. Like get involved in the industry, get involved in your community. That give back, and I think it's sort of twofold because you're going to learn in that process, but also people are going to get to know you and get to know sort of what else you have to bring to the table. I think mentorship is huge. I will tell you along my journey, many women for sure paved the way for me and gave me opportunity, but many men did also. And I think part of the reason they did, I was very vocal in what I was interested in doing. And so people were very well aware, like, oh, you know what, we should have her in that consideration set. And so I think it's kind of that combination of, continue to work on yourself, develop yourself, but also, grab some mentors, get out there and network. And like you and I were talking right before this started, it is a bit of a combination of, being at the right place. And then also you've got to have the skills to show up and do it. I will say in my particular background, I think one of the biggest thing that always dinged me is, well, do you have enough of a finance background?
Oh, yes.
And right. And so I will say my last CEO role, I had a couple rounds where I just had no finance person and I got to be the interim CFO. And so I think just that experience and that opportunity, like raise your hand. I'll also say, one way to kind of capture
Absolutely.
some of that experience too, I'm huge on volunteering. I personally sit on many boards. That's another great opportunity to, get your hands on maybe stuff that you're not doing today, right? So if you're the marketer, like, could you be the treasurer for your local nonprofit and kind of show some of that experience? And conversely, if you are the CFO, well, you know what? Could you get involved with, some of the marketing, the PR, the event type of stuff? So I think kind of constantly looking for, ways to round out your experience and then just ask for the help along the way. I think that that combination will serve you well. And then I'm also going to say, don't give up. Like, I think we are our own worst critic. And you've got to keep that fire in your belly. If you want something, don't give up on it. My husband tells me that I'm like a dog with a bone. I am not the smartest person in any room, but I will outwork anybody. I am very
Exactly.
resilient. And I definitely, I will say that's one thing I impart on my children. You've got to give a little bit more. You've got to put in that extra effort, but a lot of it is just hanging in there and do not give up. I think people give up too soon.
I think that's so valuable. Never give up should be the tagline of this podcast
Yeah,
recording.
let's do it.
I love it, right? And the way how you told my audience that you'd always hustle, right? I mean, that's not a bad culture. I mean, you should always hustle in terms of we talked about is going out your comfort zone. If you know finance, learn marketing.
Yeah.
Like for example, you're a marketer. How do you learn finance? You had to do something extra out of your role.
Yep.
Volunteering is a very important concept, but these are, I think, really good advice for aspiring CEO specifically, because you need to be a well-rounded professional to become CEO, to get hang out of all the functions. I think this is a very good advice, not only for my audience, even for me. I mean, I do data science. I'm a geek. So by doing
Yeah.
this, possibly maybe I'm doing a PR, I'm doing marketing. I don't know what I'm doing right now, but
Yes.
yeah, this is great. So Catherine, this was great, right? I want to be respectful of your time. I want to ask one parting questions. Uh,
Yes.
uh, Now, obviously, this answer will come very differently from you vis-a-vis it comes from my other guests, because you run a credit union, right? Uh, 2024, was definitely not easy, right? I mean, looking at the entire macroeconomic situation, 2025 might be better, but again, started with uh, the disaster in LA, so that will just have a toll on the entire economy of the state itself in California. So let me ask you two-pronged question. My one of my questions is, where do you think is the credit union movement going in 2025? What are your maybe top 2 or 3 predictions for this year? And second, specifically, what are your 2 cents on the California ecosystem, be it credit unions, outside credit unions? How should the economy look like?
Yeah, I have to tell you, I mean, I think the work credit unions do couldn't be more important than it is right now. I just really hope that my fellow credit unions remain mission centric, people helping people, right? We don't need to be like a bank. We really need to return to our roots and just be focused on what our founding fathers put together for us. And so I am hopeful for 2025. We continue to have consolidation happen in our industry, and I hope it's for the right reasons, right? I am always so proud of what I see some of the small credit unions doing. Like they're serving their members in a very unique and important way. So I don't necessarily think asset growth should be the aspiration for our industry. I just don't. And so I'm an optimistic person, clearly. And so I always remain hopeful that people do the right things. And so I'm hopeful that my fellow, industry mates also do the right thing, and just, look at themselves in the mirror. And, I hope that they've got some legacy board members or some legacy members. I love talking to my members that, truthfully, I could be their child. I can tell whenever I'm in a branch, I always want to talk to members, and you always tell, like, especially some of my older members, they're like, oh God, like you're the CEO. But I will say I'm so grateful to those members, and I feel responsible and obligated to make the right decision. And I keep those members in my head when I'm making those decisions, right? So I really hope that as an industry, we don't lose our way, because now couldn't be more important. You're right. Last year was very difficult. I think there's pieces of that will, continue this year. And it's important that we remain focused on serving our members, and just, let the banks do their thing. Let them do their thing. We don't
Exactly.
need to be involved in that. We just don't. And then kind of, as I look at California, and I know you and I were kind of talking about fintechs, and, like, obviously we need to be aware of our ecosystem. I will say I'm very saddened by what's happening in Los Angeles. That's where I grew up. That's where I'm from. I shared with you, I happened to be down there last week during the fires, and that was very, very, very difficult to see. And they're going to have a very difficult road ahead of them. I actually think that's going to spill out throughout our state. And so I'm kind of curious how that's going to hit me here in the Valley as we think about just sort of, supply chain, and we think about housing, and we just sort of think about that financial impact. So I do think we'll feel some of it. And I think it's too soon to tell like what that will be. So I do have concerns about that. As it relates to competition, I'm just kind of one of those folks that's, to a certain degree has my head down and focused on doing what's right for my community. So I don't get too wrapped around the axle on it, but, obviously I do recognize that, my members have a bunch of choices, and those are global choices today, right? So I better make sure that I'm relevant, that I'm meeting their needs, that I'm the choice that if they've got a problem, they can come talk to us. That's probably the spot where we definitely beat the fintechs, right?
Yes.
But we definitely need to continue evolving our own technology. We need to think about what partnerships do we pull in to leverage that. But as I think about competition, and whether that's a fintech, whether that's a major bank, I don't view credit unions as my competition. In fact, I hope just that consumers bank with credit unions, whether it's with me or the person down the street. Like I'm true blue on the co-op stuff. Like it's good for everybody. So I'm not going to view my fellow credit unions as competition. I hope they do as well as we're doing. It's important to have it on the periphery, but I'm never wrapped around the axle around what competition is doing, because I know I'm laser focused and I'm understanding what my members and my community needs, and that's what I'm building to. And I think that's what I would encourage everybody to do. Like somebody was sharing with me that they kind of keep like a list of like other credit unions' performance metrics, and I'm like,
No.
why? Like you're taking time to create that list? Who cares?
I mean, that's the reason you are a purpose-driven credit union CEO. Because, you cannot, for lack of better words, you cannot fake it. If you have it in you, then only you'll be successful running a credit union. And again, I think, we are so glad to have you in the platform, in the
Thank
talk
you
show,
so
Kathryn.
much.
This was amazing. I'm sure that my audience will grab enormous amount of good nuggets out of it. And please follow her on LinkedIn. She's a LinkedIn celebrity for sure. And if you have any questions, just reach out to her. Literally, I reached out to her on LinkedIn asking, Kathryn, do you want to come to my show? She didn't know me, literally. I came out of the blue. She was that gracious enough to spend half an hour with me. Kathryn, this is again, this was great. Thank you for coming to the podcast. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. And can I just, in closing, thank you for allowing this platform to happen. It is men like you who are changing the dynamic of the workplace. So I thank you, my friend, and I thank you for allowing me to share my journey. So thank you.
Absolutely, in the best Indian possible way, like this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.